So, when you were growing up, were you both fans of Stephen King? Like, what was your kind of first impression, like when those names like put together meant something to you?
I was a huge Stephen King fan. And I read, let's see, I started with Cujo and Christine and then Pet Sematary and then It. I'm trying to think, I didn't read The Shining until later, but thank God. But I read that, I went on a kick when I was like 8. And so that, I mean, he is the guy. He's the horror, he's the biggest in my head.
There's a lot, Dark Tower even, you know?
Dark Tower is
I mean,
great.
my God. I mean, I got into a
Stand
different
by
way.
me.
Yeah, I got in a different way, like Lord of the Rings, Dark Tower. Who was the other guy I read? But, you know, he's just... You weren't really aware of, like, Stephen King. I was an Australian, so it was like, you know, there were these great books. I didn't really piece it together that he was the one author until probably my 20s.
What is it, do you think, about his writing? I mean, it's interesting because I read it when I was very young also. So what is it about his writing that kind of really appeals to somebody maybe with a curious mind that like wants to experience something like bigger and scarier than the world that they actually live in? What do you think it is about that he brings to the table?
A curious mind. Like, you know, and also an incredible writing talent. The guy's a genius writer. He's one of the great writers, I think. In terms of literary history, he's written some, you know, it's phenomenal as well as selling. But it is that curious mind. It is that he starts and just keeps going, and he's prolific. I'd love to see how he's able to write so much, because I've heard he's actually a man of few words when he chats.
Have you ever read?
But like, my God, he writes and writes and writes.
Have you read his book on writing? Have you
No,
read this? It's
no,
really
no.
great.
Is it?
But another thing that I think is like he in the book he describes when he'd go to films, he'd like watch everything, but the things that he was really into when he was younger are like kind of the naughtier things, and I think that that's why it appeals to like
Naughty like
kids, like naughty like he didn't like the girl next door. He's like put her in a bikini and give her a gun, you know, like stuff like that, you know. I forget how he describes it, but it's like I think it appeals to people that are not only curious but like have a little naughtiness to them. As kind of the way that I think why it appealed to me in a way.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you do find out you're going to be in a Stephen King based, you know, kind of film, what do you use the book as a source material, or is the script kind of like, how do you approach it? Because obviously these are a bit different now, you know, so like how do you then approach something like this when you know that there's something like it's sitting in a library somewhere that you can kind of always go back to?
I use the book a lot. I mean, you are ultimately making the script, and you have to constantly remind yourself that. But I look at it like that's the director's responsibility. I'm going to keep bringing you stuff, and I'm going to use with this. Preparing for this was very different because the story's so everyone's in a monologue in their story. It's just there. You can keep reading it and keep listening to it and let it absorb, and you find a way to bring it out. Like, you know, at the beginning of the film, we left the cat behind. You know, these things I think subconsciously sink into your mind from the book. And you keep going back there. And it's the director's point to say, you know what, we're not going to put that in there. We can't get that in there. No, we need to keep it, you know, that's what their job is. I think our job is to bring as much as we can and offer up as much as we can.
So then when you do get the role, then what is it like for you then? Like, how did you kind of approach your Rachel? Like, obviously there's a backstory that we slowly get to see, but like even before that, like how did you create this character so that when we see you on screen, we know that there's maybe a little bit something off about like you and you're not like the perfect mom in the sense of like, how do you play that then?
I mean, there's a really good passage in the book, just going back to the book, and where she's telling Louis for the first time about the experience of growing up with Zelda and the loss of Zelda and what that was like for her, and the guilt and the sadness and her being scared and disgust and all of these things that come with you know, having taken care of somebody myself, my father, and lost him. There are all of these emotions, and it's not always like melancholy. There's also maniacal laughter, and there's also sort of madness. And in that scene in the book, she runs the like range of emotions. But what's really great about that passage, and I thought about this when I was doing it, is that prior to that moment, she keeps this part of her locked away and denies it, and then once she hits this moment, that's when that's when the floodgates open, and I think there's a moment where Louis even asks her to stop. He's like, I don't want to hear about this anymore, because her like emotions are like, it's like once you open that up, then it becomes impossible to like stop this pouring of emotions out. So I just would think about that passage in sort of in an arc for Rachel, as it was like tucking things away and then letting the floodgates open in a way.
When I watch this film, to me it feels like a family tragedy that just so happens to have scares. And so I'm just curious, like, what is your take on this film then? Like, is it a different term? Like, like, how did you approach it?
No, it is, yeah. I mean, it's a story about a family and our hopes and dreams for each other and our ability to, let go or not. And then it moves into what you're responsible for. I mean, we're always being responsible for Ellie in our movie coming back, and she's a living, breathing, whatever. And Rachel then tied into responsibility for Zelda and what that's done to her, and whether it's right or wrong to be responsible for it. But it's a nuclear family.
This seems like a wonderful pairing, and I'm just wondering, like, what is it like when you guys first met, and then, like, is there when you're shooting scenes and stuff, is this a shorthand that you guys could then play off each other a little bit, or did it take a while for it to kind of build into what we ended up seeing on screen between the two of you?
Oh, our relationship?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What? Go.
Yeah, let me think of my first impressions. I'm a big fan of his work, so I was a little intimidated. And every set's like the first day of school, where you're like, I wonder if people will like me. That's how I feel, at least. And then later you realize, like, oh, okay, I'm wonderful. But no,
You're a hot mess.
I'm a hot mess. No, I think we have a very dark. I mean, everyone has a dark sense of humor on set, and I think that's sort of where we bonded, is in the very sort of strange sense of
And we
humor.
hope the sound department wasn't recording it. But you find an ease. This is a very complicated relationship that King has created between these two people. And, you have to find that or accept it. You can find it as you go. And I think we found it as we went rather than over-qualified it or defined it beforehand. And that comes from, the type of person each of us are. You can go, okay, I don't need to cater for her. I don't need to be scared about Amy or worried about, that she's going to be this or that. It's just about, and once you give each other that trust of, like, it's okay, then it naturally finds its way in there. I mean, I love the way, Rachel and Lewis are in the book, and even the way that we found it on the screen. You can see that it's a relationship of many, many years and two children and where they're at, but it's also not over enunciated or expositioned.
It's lived in.
It lives. So that when you get to us in the bedroom having a kiss and a cuddle before the bird, it's like and then in the hallway in the other seat after that, and that comes from trust.
What I love in this film is there's a sense of dread, like literally in the first 40, and it's kind of borderline funny at some points.
Yes,
and
it
so
is, yeah.
Can you talk about your favorite kind of moments in this film that is like a little teaser of what's?
I love. I want to go, but I hadn't seen it, and I hadn't even known because it was 80 yard. But she did the line where we move into the house. We've left the cat outside. And the audience just lost their shit. I lost their shit about that, because it's like, if you know the story at all, oh my God, that's another reason this cat's coming back, but it allows you to feel comfortable about having a reaction and being loud about it in front of a room full of people. And so that really surprised me. I wasn't ready for it. I didn't know it was going to be put in or anything. And I both was like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also the thing that they did so well with this adaptation of the book, is that they knew that coming into it, like, the people had either read the book or seen the movie. And even if you haven't seen the movie or read the book, you know what Pet Sematary is about. You know that, you bury something there and it comes back. So I think what Dennis and Kevin did so well with this adaptation is that they played with everyone's sense of dread, and so that it didn't take itself too seriously. So when we say things, I mean, our pain is at they're laughing at our pain, because it's like, oh yeah, things will get worse, you don't know yet, and so it's but I think that they did such a good job of that, of in a remake, as opposed to just because horror comes from being afraid of the unexpected, and you can't just verbatim do the book over and over, or else everyone's like, well, I knew that was going to happen. Yeah. But you have to also give them what they love about the book and the previous film.
And get the feeling when it comes about being emotional, whether it's laughter or anger or whatever. It's just that way. A good film opens you up, even whether it's a romance or sentimental or whatever, or horror. It's got to open you up. to get into, you know, allow you to feel comfortable being whatever, a hot mess.
It's me, yeah.
We'll leave it at that.